Good morning. Let's stand together as we sing. We sing that Christ himself, Jesus himself, he is enough for us in every area of our life. And Christ is my reward in all of my devotion. And now there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. And through every trial, my soul will sing. There's no turning back, and I've been set free. 'Cause Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me, and everything I need is in you. Everything I need, Christ my all in all. He's the joy of my salvation. And this hope will never fail, 'cause heaven is our home. No matter what, through every storm, my soul will sing. Jesus is here. To God be the glory, 'cause Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me, and everything I need is in you. You're everything I need. Let's sing these words together. We're following Jesus no matter what. And I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. 'Cause Christ is enough for me. Yeah, Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you, Lord. You're everything I need. And Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. You're everything I need. And I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. And I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. And I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. been convicted about this as we've been through the Sermon on the Mount, seeing Jesus for all that he is, all that he teaches, but all that he stands for. We've seen this a lot, but let's sing this together. Through every battle, through every heartbreak, through every circumstance, I believe that you are my fortress, yeah, and you are my portion, and you are my hiding place, and I believe you are the way, the truth, and the life. I believe you are the way and the truth. You're the life. I believe through every blessing, through every promise, through every breath I take, I believe that you are provider, yeah, and you are protector, and you are the one I love. Oh, I believe you are the way, you're the truth, and the life. I believe you are the way, the truth, you're the light. I believe you are. We believe there's no better way than the way of Jesus. It's a new start with him. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today, mercies that I knew. All my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I am here with you. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that I knew. All my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way and the truth. You're the light. I believe you are the way and the truth. You're the light. I believe you are. It's a new horizon, and I'm set on you. And you meet me here today with mercies that I knew. All my fears and doubts, well, they can all come to, because they can't stay long when I believe you are the way, the truth, you're the light. I believe you are the way, the truth, you're the light.
first times we were rehearsing this song, excuse me, Kevin and Jewel and I were practicing, and that first verse, when it says, 1,000,000 shattered parts, I kept singing 1,000. And they were like, Marie, it's 1,000,000. And I said, that doesn't make any sense, that's too many. And they were like, that's kind of the point. You know, in our humanness, a 1,000-piece puzzle can be overwhelming, right? Can you imagine a 1,000,000-piece puzzle? And his extravagant, graceful, beautiful, wonderful love every time can put that puzzle together, can mend it, make it better, right? That's amazing. So will you pray with me to this wonderful, beautiful, extravagant God that we have? God, we just thank you for this time to get together, to worship you, to proclaim that your name is the name above every other name. We thank you for that. We don't deserve it. We love you so very much. And we just pray that you would be with everything that goes on in this service, every note sung, every word said. It's in Jesus' name we ask these things. Amen. You can be seated.
Good morning. Glad you're here this morning. And this morning we're going to do something a little bit different. I got a couple announcements for you, and then I want to introduce you to and kind of just talk about some changes we've had happen over the last couple of months. So a couple things that are going on, just so you know. The lab is ending here in the next week or so, right? So next week will be the last week of the lab. That evening begins the identity class. If you have not done the identity class, talk to somebody who has. So far, we've had just people that have, it's been a life-changing thing. Even, I mean, as I've gone through it, the couple times we've done it, it has been life-changing for me, and not necessarily in like the way that it's like fun life change, but like in a really painful and sometimes difficult way. But that's, I think, sometimes how we grow. And so I hope you'll be a part of it. It's a 7-week experience. It's not light on homework. I'm just going to be honest with you. There's some things you have to do on your own. I don't apologize for that. I don't know about you, but life change doesn't happen easily. We live in a culture where we want to get the most change for the least amount of work, right? Like that's like how every infomercial works, is we want the most change for the least amount of work. And this isn't how life change really works. That's not how it works. That's how infomercials work. But I'm not here to give you one of those. I'm here to tell you the truth. And that's that I think life change happens with actual work, with hard work. And that's what we're going to do during that time. So I hope that you'll be a part of it. And I don't want to water it down. I really love it. I think it's great, but I'd love for you to be a part of it. So that begins on October 2nd. It's going to begin in the evening. It will be at, is it 7 o'clock? Is that what time we're doing that? 6 to 8. Sorry, 6 to 8. And so it'll be a couple hours. It's downstairs here. There's teaching, there's groups, there's, again, homework, all that kind of stuff going on. It's a great 7-week experience. We'd love for you to do that heading into, it'll get done before Thanksgiving. So we'd love for you to be a part of that. A couple other things going on that we have right now happening around the church. First of all, students tonight. Students, there's a lot going on in students, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. We have a great group of students who are getting together every week, and I'm not going to lie to you. I don't always know why. We have these students who keep coming. They're middle schoolers, high schoolers. Most of them have never stepped foot in this service. And we, it's not even like we do something good. Like Janessa and I just kind of show up. Jules there, like we're just kind of there. And then kids like come and we're like, what are you doing? We didn't really plan anything cool. We're not doing anything great. And they show up. And I don't know why, but we love it. And so it's growing. It's been a great group of students. And so if you have a middle school or high school, you know somebody who's middle school, high school, we'd love for them to be there. If you want to work with middle schoolers and high schoolers, God bless you. We would love for you to work with middle schoolers and high schoolers. We'd love to build that team. So with that being said, what I'd love to do is real quickly introduce you to my friend and yours, Casey Stringer. So if you know Janessa, Janessa has been a part of Restoration like literally since negative day one. Like before this thing ever happened. And so I can't even express my gratitude toward her for what she's done and the huge just sacrifice that she's made to be a part of this since before it was even conceived. And so I'm grateful for that. What's happened over the last couple of years is Janessa decided that she needed to like get hitched, and I don't know why. I mean, Paul's pretty clear about singleness and like it's fine.
And there's really no issue with that in the Bible. So I didn't get it, but she was like, I think I need to find me a husband. And so she was looking around and she found this fella, and any person she met, I just want to let you know, they were seriously vetted, not necessarily by Janessa, but by us. Because I was also worried that, like, what if they just wanted to get her kidney from her or something like that? You never know, guys. It's a weird world out there. And so I was like, what if they're just doing her for, like, I was like, if that's the first question they ask you on your first date is like, hey, how are your kidneys? Like, please don't stay with them, leave, you know? And so I was a little worried about that. But this guy, Casey, came along. I vetted him. Others, Ken Morris, who has Googling powers that none of us will ever experience, he found him, and like we found him and followed along with what was going on there. And we were very happy when they got together, and then when they got engaged, which was a really special day for them. Mostly because Janessa got to eat tacos. She was excited about the engagement, but I remember watching from afar as I sat across a park watching them, waiting for them. We were all hiding in bushes waiting for them to get engaged. And Janessa was like not giving in because Casey had gotten her tacos. And so she was very concerned about finishing the taco. And you can tell Casey's trying to move it along. And she's just like, I'm going to eat this taco. And so she was very worried about that. Meanwhile, I'm standing next to two folks who are homeless folks there in the park in St. Pete. And they are blaring the first Eminem album. And so it's hard to watch a romantic scene on the water over here when you're hearing, I'm Slim Shady, yes, I'm the real Shady, all you others. And I was like, come on. Okay, anyways. So they eventually got engaged. It was a beautiful moment, except for the part that we almost set the park on fire, and it did look a little bit like a riot. Anyways, they got married, and Casey is a youth pastor, has been a youth pastor at another church, and he has been working down in St. Pete. And over the last couple of years, they've talked and decided that they wanted to kind of be able to go to church together. I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty awesome. And so we're grateful now that we get to have them both here at our church, not just as a married couple, but just the things that they bring as a staff and as help to what we're doing. So Janessa's taken a different job. Her role is going to be decreasing just a little bit here at the church. She's not gone. It's not anything like that. She's just going to be decreasing her role here so she can focus on a different job that she now has in the schools. But Casey's going to be stepping on just a little bit. He's going to be doing some hours here, and what he's going to be doing here is handling our youth ministry. Again, this growing thing that we don't really put a lot of attention into, we're hoping will be even better because we have somebody who is very attentive to that. And so what I want to do is I want to bring Casey up here. I want to bring actually Janessa up here as well. And our elders. Our elders have been a part of this process. We've been kind of navigating how to handle hours and all roles and stuff. And I just want to pray over them as we kind of bring them and just kind of change their roles, all the things that are happening around here, and just commission them for God's work here. So if you would, where you are, if you want to just join in, what I'd love for you to do is you can just reach your hand out as though you are laying hands on them as well. We see this as a practice through the Bible, a practice of laying hands on as we pray for someone. So I'm going to pray for them as we join together. Jesus, we thank you so much for Casey and for Janessa. We thank you for their dedication to one another and especially their dedication to you, first and foremost. And I thank you so much for the way that you have brought their lives together, and I just thank you that their lives are here together now in this church. And so we thank you for both of their roles and their willingness to do ministry, even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, and especially at the times where it's glorious. And I just pray that there would be a lot of glorious days ahead, a lot of fun things. I pray for the ministry that each one of them will have, the people that they'll get to invest their lives into, and I pray that you would have just multiply their impact as a couple and multiply their impact as individuals as well. We love them, and we thank you for your love for each one of us, and I pray that you would help us to lead and guide Restoration Church, as well as each individual person within it, towards becoming contributors to the kingdom of heaven. No matter what age they are, no matter what stage of life they're in, that we would each one do our part to move towards contribution to the kingdom of heaven. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen. Would you give him a hand for being here? Yeah. All right, one last thing I want to tell you about is is this for me? Oh, for Katie. Okay, Katie's going to come. A couple of quick things. We have, are we doing that right now? Is that Second Saturday Serve? We need to talk about that. And then we have a couple things to talk about. So Second Saturday Serve, I'm going to have Katie share with you about what's happened and what's going to happen. One last thing I do want to mention is in October, on the first Tuesday of October, I think it's the 4th, we will be having a worship night. And so we'll be doing that together here in the church. We'd love to have you be a part of that. But yeah, Katie, if you want to come up and tell us just a little about that, that would be fantastic about second Saturday serve.
Hello, good morning. This is so exciting. Okay, so just for the next couple of months for Second Saturday Serve, I want to get this stuff on your radar a little bit, and because we're going to need some help. We're going to be serving. And so in October, the date is going to be it just went out of my head. 22nd. I had
They
fun
all
now,
know.
guys. Okay, October 22nd, we're going to be doing family photos for foster families in our community. And so I am going to need some people to help with checking people in and just assisting the photographers and that stuff. So anybody wants to help with that, it's going to be on Saturday, probably in the morning, the 22nd, October 22nd. See, it'll help us all remember better because I messed it up. Okay, so get with me, come see me if you would like to help with that. No photography skills necessary, but if you have those, let me know that too. That's great. Okay, and then our next one is going to be a block party, and that's going to be here on November 12th. And so we're going to need a lot of volunteers for that. We're going to need people to help with setup. We're going to need people to just greet folks and really just to come and be there to meet our neighbors. We're going to have some good food. We're going to have some music, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. Bounce houses, yeah, yep. Good. Okay, that was a good choice. All right, great. So come see me if you want to help with any of those things and just want to put those on your radar.
Last thing, if you would, stand up, give like a handshake, a hug, a high five, an elbow bump, whatever is appropriate for your relationship level to those folks around you. And kids, you are dismissed to head downstairs. Glad you're here this morning, and we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount, looking at different things that Jesus teaches, specifically just straight through it, really. Again, we're going to spend a while on this because this is a complex teaching. There's a lot going on. Today, we're going to talk about something that I don't know if you've ever dealt with or had this happen to you. I don't know if you've just ever had the time where you could say and point to, like, that was when I got really, really angry. In theory, I don't struggle with this a ton. My wife, I asked her last night, I was like, can you think of a time where I was really angry? And she was like, not really. But then I came in last night to set up, and I had to check my spirit a little bit. So it humbled me, right? That's the way this works. And so I remember when I was in first grade, I was on a basketball team at the YMCA, and we were not good. We were not good. And it was me and my best friends, and we played on this little team, and we were terrible. We didn't win a game, and we got blown out. Not as bad, by the way, my college that I was a part of, I know that the soccer team here struggles at Trinity. I found out last night that my college that I went to, they started a football program. And last night they made it on ESPN because they lost 98-0 in football. 98-0. Yeah, they made it on ESPN though. So... Warner, right? Yeah, go Royals. Yeah, they stopped them from getting 100. Not today, Satan. So take that. But anyways, my team was bad. We were not good at basketball. And I remember there was one game where we were just getting blown out. We were like these little tiny kids. We were not good at this sport. We were young in the division we were in. We were playing the older kids that were big and strong, and they were really good. And there was one play, I still have it on video, in fact, where we came down the court. And my friend Kyle was his name. He dribbled the ball down the court. Now, he got to about the three-point line because that's as close as we could get to the basket because we were not good. And he just heaved the ball. I mean, it wasn't a shot. I would not call it a shot. It was a heave. He just threw the ball in the air, and somehow that ball went flying, and it hit the backboard, and it bounced around for a while, and eventually it went through the hoop. It was the only basket we scored the entire game, and it was a three-pointer, and it was a big deal. But I remember the next day we went to school, and Kyle was there, and he starts bragging about how many shots he made. And it went from one shot to soon it was like 2 shots, and then 3 shots. And soon the shot wasn't at the three-point line, it was at half court. And soon it was further back. It was at the other team's three-point line, like all the way back. And it just got bigger and bigger. And I guess that I did not enjoy this. I was getting really mad. And my first grade teacher told my mom, she said, I watched Kevin through the day, and his face just got redder and redder and redder until finally he starts telling people that he had scored about 20 points that night. Our team had not scored 20 points all season, and that he made multiple three-point shots and half-court shots, and that he was probably going to become an all-star. We didn't have an all-star league. And I guess in the middle of class, as he's saying this, I stood up and my face was red and I pointed my finger as though I was some kind of dignified, I don't know, congressman or something from the 1776. And I stood up and I screamed across the room and I just, liar! I'd had enough. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know if anger to you is something that happens as a split second or if it's something that happens as a constant thing. I don't know about for you if it's like a slow simmer or if it's just a fast boil. I don't know if you're microwaving anger or if it's sitting in a crock pot. I don't know how it works for you. Maybe you're a person who's just quick-tempered. Maybe you're a person who's constantly carrying it everywhere you go. Or maybe you're a person who it really takes a long time, but once you get there, you're angry. I think all of us at least understand the emotion of being angry. And it turns out that we kind of live in a world where our culture says that anger is just a character trait. It's just part of who you are. It's a normal part of character. But Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, in the biggest sermon, the most complex teaching he ever does, he decides to address it directly and say, this isn't just a character issue. This is a kingdom issue. This is what will make the kingdom of heaven come to earth if you can handle your anger appropriately. This is actually that important to him. You would think that he would start with something else or go some different route. You would think there would be other things he would talk about, but he talks specifically about anger. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through that. We're going to look at what he teaches, and then we're going to take it apart for a bit. If you have a Bible, I would encourage you to turn. Oh, by the way, if you want to grab a notebook, we finally got some of these in, and you're welcome to grab some notebooks. They're just back at the Connect desk. If you're a person who loves to take notes, I know that we don't like really hand out notes. I don't do like fill in the blank because I don't think that far ahead, and I don't know what's a good blank most of the time. I'm like, well, is that worth filling in? I don't know. But if you want, people forget, there's a rush right now on the notebooks. But if you want a notebook, yeah, grab a notebook. I'd love for you to take notes, especially as we go through the series. I know a lot of people have been asking for I know last week did not get recorded and did not make it up on the website. So people were asking for my notes. And guys, if you ever ask me for my notes after a sermon, I'm just going to warn you, you don't want my notes. My notes are a disaster. So you don't have to like shake your head like, yeah, they are a disaster, but they are. My notes are a disaster. So don't take my notes, write your own notes, okay? So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, and that's where Jesus is teaching this Sermon on the Mount. Again, he's up on a mountain on the north side of the Sea of Galilee, and he is teaching over this mountain looking over the water. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. And so he starts teaching. Now, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but look at verse 20. I want you to see verse 20 right off the bat. He says this. This is where we left off last week. Verse 20, for I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, anybody who heard this at that moment would have been like, wait, hold on. I have to be better than the best. The Pharisees, again, in our minds, sometimes they're like a joke or they're hypocrites, which they are, or whatever. But it's actually believed that Jesus probably was a Pharisee. Most studies now actually show that probably Jesus might have been one of them. That's why he's so hard on them, is because he's speaking insider language. Like, guys, we need to do better. Not just for you guys, but for us, we need to do better. And so he is even probably a Pharisee, but the Pharisees are the most righteous. They are the best at the law. They know the Bible better than anyone else. They're literate, which is very uncommon in this culture. They're very smart. They're shrewd. They know what they're doing. And he's saying those people, the people that you think of, the best of the best, those people, if you're not better than them at righteousness. Now remember, righteousness does not mean at being good. It means being in the right relationship with God. So that's important. But he says, unless you're better than they are at this, at being in relationship with God, then you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, we talked about this last week, and I'm sure it was, really impactful, and you remember all of it. But we talked about that. That's where we left off. Now, Jesus, from that point, again, you would think that he's going to give us some things that are going to be really important to him. He's going to tell us how to do that, and he does. The things he's going to do from this point on, there's 6 things called the 6 antitheses. The 6 antitheses are 6 teachings that he's going to do from this point on to tell us this is what you've heard, but this is what I say. So it's the antithesis. This is what you've heard, but this is what I say. And if you're a big fan of soap operas or evening primetime soaps, if you're a Grey's Anatomy person, and some of you are, Janessa, I know some of you are big into Grey's Anatomy, and you've been following for all 76 seasons it's been on. It's been on so long. It's so long. And I'll be honest with you guys, I do have to admit, I watched it for the first season or two. I made 3 seasons maybe. I made it a while. And then I was it took me a second where I was like, wait a second, this is a soap opera. I think I'm watching a soap opera. And I stopped watching it. But it took me a while to realize it. It's like if anybody's ever watched Lost, and it takes you a couple seasons to be like, wait a second, I'm watching a bad show. I need to stop watching the show, but you kind of can't, and you just kind of stick with it. I mean, some of us, we stuck it out the whole time. Anybody else do that? You stuck it out the whole time, and then you were like, that's why they call it Lost, because I lost 6 years of my life. Anyways, yeah, Grey's Anatomy, that kind of thing. If you're a Scandal person, any Shonda Rhimes probably, you could enjoy what Jesus is about to teach. Because what he's about to teach is things like murder. There's going to be adultery. There's going to be what he calls oaths, but really it's about more manipulation or lying to each other. I mean, it's all the soap opera stuff. You're going to love it. So hang in there. So he's going to teach this kind of stuff from that point forward. But what we're going to do is we're going to read this whole thing, and we're going to read this part, specifically at the first part about murder, is what might be at the top of your Bible. But we'll see it's not really about murder. It's about something else. Verse 21. So you've heard it said, right? You've heard it said, and it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder. Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Let's read this whole thing, this whole section here. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Go first and be reconciled with them, and then come back and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart. We're going to do parts of this, okay? Then we're going to talk about the progression, because I think Jesus is creating a progression here. And then we're going to end with some practical steps, okay? So just follow me for a second. I apologize. We're going to part this out. So let's take this apart, because actually this is a very dense teaching, and there's a lot happening in here. And then we're going to kind of look at the progression that Jesus is laying down, and then we're going to look at the practical steps he gives at the end. So let's go back through it. So verse 21, okay? Verse 21, let's take this apart. It says this, you have heard it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder. Okay, that's coming right out of Exodus, by the way. That's straight out of Exodus chapter 20, verse 13. This is actually number 6 in the 10 Commandments. That's where it comes from. Everybody knows this verse, pretty simple verse. You shall not murder. Okay? So he's saying, you've heard that said. That comes right from the Bible. You've heard it said, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Now, Here's why I think he says this, is he starts with murder, and most of us are like, well, never done that, so I think I'm good. You know, like, I think this is why we watch so many murder shows. If we're being, like, I love Dateline. I love me a good Dateline. Lester Holt's doing his thing, and Keith Morrison has that rich, deep baritone, and he, again, uses phrases that nobody should ever use and wears leather jackets at an age that I'm not sure is appropriate anymore, but I love Keith Morrison. You know, so I love watching Dateline. I don't know if you have your murder show where it's like, I love watching whatever it is, CSI, Criminal Minds, whatever your thing is. I don't know your life. But everybody's got their murder show, right? Everybody's got their murder podcast or something where you love that. And I think we like it. I like it for two reasons. One, it's told me exactly what the breaking point is of life insurance that I should get out without getting murdered by my wife. Because it's always the spouse, we know that, and it's always right after a new life insurance policy has been issued. And so I try to think like, well, they seem worth a lot. This is how much they took out. Maybe I should take out less than that because I'm worth less than them. You know, that kind of thing. So I do keep my ratios tight there. That's what it's helpful for. But the other thing I think it's helpful for is that we all watch it because we're like, well, at least I'm not that guy. At least I'm not murdered. Like if I'm watching somebody else get murdered, it means I'm not murdered. Or if I'm watching somebody else get murdered, it means I did not murder anybody. I'm better than them. Like it's like, anybody watch that show Hoarders? Do you remember the show Hoarders where it was, yeah, because you watched it because you were like, man, my house is so clean right now. Look how good this place looks. I'm not them, right? And so that's kind of the way Jesus is doing this. He's actually saying like, so you're listening to him going, yeah, I never murdered anybody. Done pretty well. You know, I think I've followed all the laws. And so he's setting them up almost for failure, just like for us. We hear this immediately and we're like, yeah, I never killed anybody, so pretty good day. I think I nailed that one. I've got number 6 on the 10 Commandments down. But Jesus takes it a step further. Notice what he says. Anybody who has murdered will be subject to judgment, is what he says, right? But then he says that the next group is also subject to the same judgment. Notice this. It says, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister they'll be subject to judgment. The same thing is going to happen to them. Just angry with a brother or sister. And now, let's talk about what anger means. Because isn't Jesus angry? Doesn't he get angry sometimes? Like, is anger a sin? I don't think anger itself is by itself a sin. Jesus does get angry. We see him get angry in the Bible. It's a little different than our version of anger. So I found a clinical definition of anger that I really liked. And this is one that comes out of a nursing journal. But it said, a feeling of tension or hostility caused by anxiety aroused by a perceived threat to one's self, possessions, rights, or one's values. Okay, think about this for a quick second. Now, here's what I love about this definition. 2 things. One is that it very much clarifies that this is a perceived threat. I just recently had to take a whole course on conflict resolution and conflict management. And as I was going through that, what was amazing is that even the definition of conflict comes down to a perceived lack of resources. That we perceive that there's not enough for both of us. That's what conflict comes down to. Whether it's there's not enough money or there's not enough respect or whatever it might be. It comes down to a perception of that. But it's interesting because it doesn't come down to a reality of that. Most times it comes down to a perception of that. Does that make sense? That's what's happening here. It's a perceived threat. Doesn't mean that it's a real threat. It's the way you are provoked. It's what you think is happening to you. And secondly, notice that it says to one's possession, like to myself, one's self, or to one's possessions or rights or for myself. That's what I'm most angry about. That's when I get most angry, is when I feel threatened, when I feel attacked, when I feel as though I'm not going to get what's mine or what I think I deserve. That's when I get most angry. Now, this is one of the key definitions that does change our understanding of anger versus God's version of anger. God has a different version of anger. In fact, John Stott, who's one of the greatest theologians on specifically the Sermon on the Mount, has a great quote about what God's anger is. He says this, it's his steady, unrelenting, unremitting, uncompromising antagonism to evil in all its forms and manifestations. And I love that because here's the difference between God's anger and our anger, is God is actually never angry for himself. He's not angry about what you've done to him. That doesn't actually make him angry. He gets angry mostly about what you've done to someone else. When Jesus comes to the temple and gets angry, he's not angry for what he's experiencing for him, his oppression or his victimization. That's not how he sees himself. He sees himself as now standing up for those who are being oppressed, not for his own oppression. Does that make sense? It's a different form of anger than the way most of us work. So yes, there's different ways of looking at anger here. And Jesus does get angry. But what's interesting is the way he uses this word. Now, there's two ways to say angry in Greek, okay? And I apologize. I know this series has a lot in Greek, but I hope that it helps. I'm hoping I'm not like boring you with it, but I hope it's helpful. There's two ways to look at the word angry in Greek. One is the word thumos. Thumos is the most common form of anger. And what it is, it's like an outburst. It's like it happens all at once, okay? So thumos is the outburst, the passion or wrath. It's that kind of thing. It's a very quick version. And that's like, if you've ever, I mean, this is like when somebody cuts you off in traffic, right? It's the instant form of anger. Happens really quickly. It's what happens when you snap at somebody. When you're just that moment where you just can't take it anymore and you snap. It's that moment where like you just kind of get, it may have been building for a bit, but it's that quick version. And it goes away quickly too. It dissipates quickly. It's the moment when your kids, oh man, when your kids, I'm just hypothetically speaking, it's that moment where your kids just don't know when they should try to give you a wet willy and when not to. And again, this is hypothetical. I'm just saying in some households this happens. But, oh man, guys, I taught my kids what that is, like, the wet willy thing. And I thought it was funny. And it backfired because I thought it was fun. And like at night we have like wet willy wars and it gets pretty intense. And even our dog gets in on it. It's weird, but it's fun. And we have a whole thing that goes on a lot in our house, except for the other day. I snapped. I thumosed. I walked through the door and I had been out for a run. It's like 6:30 in the morning. I'd already been out for a run. I'd been running for a while. It was a pretty long run. I was very tired. And I came in, I'm sweaty. It's still dark outside. And I'm thinking nobody in my house is even awake. And as I walk through the door, and I'm sweaty, I'm tired, I'm already like just ready to get on with the day. And as I walk through the door, my son just attacks. And just like he jumps on me and tries to give me a wet willy at that moment of all moments. And I will say I thumosed. Like I thumosed. I was so mad in that moment. And I threw him off like a child that shouldn't be thrown. And I'm sure CPS got a call and stuff, but it scared me to death, guys. And it just made me so mad. Now, other times it's fine. This might be something that happens to you. It catches you off guard. It's that moment where you're like, I don't know why I reacted that way. Why was I so angry in that moment? That's what this is. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. So in this version right here, what he says is it's a different word. It's a word orgazomenos. And this word is a different version of anger. Now, it comes from the word orgazio or orgizo, and it's kind of this verb which means that it's not just a quick, short-tempered thing. This is a long fuse that's been going on for a long time. It's something that's been deeply embedded within you. It's an anger or a natural disposition towards anger. A natural disposition towards anger. Like it stayed with you. Dale Bruner, who's one of the greatest like New Testament commentators, he calls it a perpetual anger or an ongoing anger. In fact, the reason that you see that orgazomenos, the menos part, why that's on there is because it's a present participle. I know this is boring, but what that means is it goes on forever. It's not happening just now and over. That means it happens forever. It is angering all the time. It's deeply embedded within you. And guys, I don't know about you. Have you ever met anybody like this? Do you know anybody like this? Are you sometimes this person? Where like, I mean, let's even say it. I've met some Christians that are meaner than the devil. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like there's people, they're just mean. They're looking for the moment to get angry. Like they're waiting for it. They're so excited to get angry somehow. It's like deeply embedded within their character. It's like there all the time. You know the people I'm talking about? You know how I'm talking about? Like, it's a normal part of who they are. And for many of us, we don't even notice it maybe in our own lives, but it sits there. It stays there. It's there for a long time. And it's interesting because I think our culture, and this is why I think what Jesus teaches here is countercultural, because I think what he's doing is he's telling us that this is different than your culture. I think our culture almost glamorizes or glorifies anger at its own level. Now, sometimes it's that thumos type of anger where it glorifies like that quick hit kind of anger. We all love it, honestly. You love it when you see a headline that says, this person outraged by this thing. Or this group outraged by that thing. As soon as they can put outraged in there, or angered, or made mad, whatever, we will start to read it. Or if they put it on TV where somebody starts to get yelling at somebody else, we actually love that. I don't know if you ever watched ESPN. Just watch it. Watch First Take for like 30 seconds. And it's just a bunch of guys yelling at each other. I don't even know what they're saying half the time. They're just mad at each other about life. And I don't get it. Some of them, it might be okay. Like some of them might be Mets fans and they've had a rough life. I get it. But I'm just saying, like, in general, they are angry. They're yelling at each other, right? And so, like, that's what's happening. And we, like, kind of indulge it. We kind of love it. I mean, there's that whole go-off culture where it's like, go off now. Go off, girl. Get you, and you say what you need to say. We kind of love that. In fact, we're even taught to some extent that this is like when the best things happen. We were yesterday, my family, we went to go, the Harry Potter films being re-released in theaters, and they were like really cheap. And so we went to the theater to go watch it. And we're watching it. And in the movie, they asked Harry Potter, they were like, have you ever had a moment where you were really angry? And then did you feel like something magical happened? And that's when magic happened, was when he was angry. And we almost like teach that, right? There's like this whole idea that you won't like me when I'm angry, right? When I get angry is almost when something good happens. We kind of glorify this kind of thing in our culture. And I think it's kind of scary to see what that's manifested, because has it made it better? Has it made us better? Is this something that's like getting us down the road to where we want to be? Not necessarily. Now, we will talk another time, and actually this week, if I have time, I'm going to record kind of a podcast on this, because there are some sides of objectification, oppression that I think Jesus is talking about in this that we'll get to, and where that kind of anger comes in, because Jesus does, again, he is angry about the right things, but there's a real negative side to the anger that we see here. In our culture, it's so common, it becomes a very normal thing in our culture. But he goes on, and again, he says that if you do that, you are subject to judgment the same way as everybody else. You're going to have judgment. Now, he goes on from there. He says, again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And you guys, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I mean, I've heard some Rakas around here, and it is literally in Greek, this was a 4-letter word. It really was. Jesus is saying something that is a 4-letter, I'll never forget. Anybody play categories where you get like a letter and then you have to write a word with that letter as the beginning of it? And I'll never forget it. My mom, she's like the most saintly woman you've ever met, who like grew up in church. She's been in church since before she was born kind of person. And she's very conservative, very whatever. And I remember we were playing categories and the letter was F. And the clue was you had to write down a 4-letter word. And we all were like, fork or food. And she was like, oh, no, I can't read mine. And we were like, please don't. Please don't. Yeah, thank you. I could not believe she did that. This is like that kind of 4-letter word. This is like the one you're thinking of. This is that kind of word. Jesus is actually like really putting it out there. In fact, the word is pretty ugly in its culture, what it means. And he's saying if you say that, if you put that out there, and in our culture, it's not maybe raka. It's that word that you use when you call somebody something. It's when you're cut off in traffic, what's the word that comes out of your mouth? You moron. You idiot. You are a hindrance. Something like that to my life, whatever it might be. You have that word that comes out of your mouth, and what he's saying is you've started to call them a name, you've given them a category, and now that you've given them a category, you can call them whatever you want. In fact, he goes on from there. He says that person is answerable to the court. Then he says, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now, he's not saying the word fool, like specifically that word, okay? The word there in Greek is the word moros, which is where we get the word moron, by the way. Moros, moron, same word. And that's where we get that word. Now, Jesus actually calls people kindly. He calls them morons later on in this sermon. So it's kind of fun, actually. But what he's saying is he calls it, if you remember at the end of the sermon, we'll get to this in, I don't know, a couple months. But at the end of this, when he says to everybody, remember he says the wise and foolish builder. He calls somebody the wise builder who builds their house on the rock and the foolish builder. That word foolish is actually the word moros. Those of you that are not as intelligent. He's literally talking about intelligence here. For those of you that are not as smart, which is kind of funny. But he's not saying it directly to them. He's not calling them a category. He's talking about this. And this is what happens here, is we start to move from people's actions, we move to who they are. And we don't just insult their actions, we insult their personhood. And this is what Jesus is concerned about. The moment that we start to shift from calling somebody out on what they've done to calling them out on who they are, that's where it becomes a problem. And we do this all the time. We create labels, we create actual names for people or for groups of people so that we can write them off as what we want them to be because it's easier that way. And so we create labels for them. And he's saying that's the problem I have here, is that you're starting to dehumanize somebody and make them just a category instead of a person. And when you do that, you've dehumanized an image bearer of God. Now, this is an honor-shame culture that Jesus is talking to. It's a little different than our culture, but actually I would say we're moving towards it. But in the 3rd century, an honor-shame culture was a little bit more intense than what we experience today. The honor-shame culture was a culture where you did not have your own identity. Today, we believe that it doesn't matter where you're born, doesn't matter where you grew up, doesn't matter what your income was, doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status was. What matters is that you are a person and that you have every ability to succeed in this life. That's what we're taught when we're young. In this culture and what Jesus is talking to, they were a people who you could not earn any sort of respect. You were only given the respect you were going to get. So what other people said about you was actually more important than what you were in your own way. So when somebody called you this, it was a big deal. In fact, the rabbis had a saying that they would use in the Talmud, and they wrote, there were 3 classes of people. They wrote there were 3 classes of people that go down into Gehenna and return not. These are the 3 people that they said would go to Gehenna. Gehenna means hell. We're going to talk about that in a second. The adulterer, he who puts his neighbor openly to shame, which is what we're seeing here, and he who gives his neighbor an insulting name. The rabbi said there's basically nobody worse than this. They go down to hell and they don't return. This is the kind of culture they're in. And it says right after that, when you say, "You fool," you will be in danger of the fires of hell. A real quick trigger warning on the word hell there. I know some of us have different images there. And I'm not going to go too far on this, but I do want to make this clear. I would love to do a whole series on hell, but it's really hard to market that. Like come to church and hear about hell, which most churches you can go any Sunday and hear about it, really. What Jesus is saying here when he says that you will be subject to the fires of hell, it's different than maybe the version that you've pictured in your head. We have like the Dante's Inferno, if you've read that version, that really did influence a lot of Christian life. And Dante's Inferno, it's a brilliant book. It's a great read. However, it's also a guy who really needed a good mental health counselor. And like, there's a lot going on there. There's also other people that that we've seen kind of this version of hell. Maybe you've watched a Left Behind series with Kirk Cameron or with Nick Cage, whichever one you choose. They're both great and horribly inaccurate, by the way. Please don't watch them. But like those kind of things, maybe you've experienced that. Or maybe maybe you have a picture of hell that you've been taught or you've been given, or you've gone through the judgment house in Halloween, and you've kind of had this horrible experience, and you've been like, this is what hell will be like if I die in a car accident today. This is where I'm going to go. Now, I'm not saying that hell someday is not real. Don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying that's not real, but the picture we have is very skewed. What Jesus says in this exact passage is he says that you'll be subject to the fires of Gehenna. Gehenna is the word for hell that we see actually most commonly in the New Testament. But Gehenna was not a fictitious, futuristic place. Gehenna was a very real place, very much right here on this earth as they were talking. So Gehenna is a real place right outside of Jerusalem. In fact, I think I have a picture of it if you want to see Gehenna. This is hell. This is modern day Gehenna, but right past that orange building there, if you look, there's a valley. Do you see that valley where the hillside comes down? In the distance is Jerusalem. That valley is Gehenna Valley. That is hell. That's what it is. If you're looking, the entrance to hell is just kind of like right past that orange building right there. In fact, you can even find TripAdvisor pictures and reviews of hell. So if you want to look it up, I mean, people can tell you how Gehenna was. It's a very real place. And this valley that Jesus is talking about, he says it's Gehenna. You're going to be subject to the fires of hell. Now, it was believed that it was mostly a trash heap that was kept on fire every single day. They would just throw trash. They would come down to Gehenna there. You can see there's a wall on the top of that mountain, on the top of that hill. And there was actually a wall so you could throw your trash over that hill. And then as it went down into the hill, they would just burn it constantly. There was just an ongoing fire. So this is where you hear about things like a fire that's in hell. You hear about it being a place of worthlessness, whatever. But it was a very real place that actually existed. Now, this goes back, and you can find other places in the Bible where they talk about Gehenna as a real place. At its worst, this was one of the most terrifying and worst places in Jerusalem's history. It was really, really bad what happened here. In fact, if you go back, I'll just show you a couple passages, but in Chronicles 28, verse 3, this is, so you'll see in the Hebrew, it's called Ben Hinnom. Now, you can almost hear Gehenna come out of that, but these are two different languages, Hebrew to Greek, but it's the same exact place. Behennom became Gehenna. But notice this. It says this. He burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom and sacrificed his own children. This is King Ahaz. He sacrificed his own children in the fire there, engaging in detestable practices of the nation, and the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. So bad things happened in this valley. Bad things were known to happen there. It was like the worst place in Jerusalem's history. In fact, it goes on in Jeremiah. Let me see here. In Jeremiah, there's another spot. Do we have it up there? Jeremiah 19, I think it is. Yeah, verse 1. So it says this. This is what the Lord says. Go and buy a clay jar from the potter. And it says, take along some of the elders and the people and the priests. Go out to the valley of Ben Hinnom, or Gehenna, or hell, near the entrance of the potsherd gate. Then proclaim the words, I'll tell you, and say, hear the word of the Lord, you kings of Judah and people of Jerusalem. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Listen, I'm going to bring disaster on this place that will make the ears of everyone who hears tingle. For they've forsaken me. They have made this a place of foreign gods. They have burned incense in it to gods that neither they nor their ancestors nor their kings of Judah have ever known. And they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent. They have built in the high places of Baal to burn their children in the fire and offerings to Baal. Something I did not command, nor did I mention, nor did it enter my mind. So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer call this place Topheth, or the valley of Gehenna, or Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. This is like where the worst things happened in the history of Israel. So they would use it as an actual dumping ground. And what Jesus is saying, here's why this is important, here's why this matters, is what Jesus is saying is he's not just talking about you will be subject to the fires of hell someday. Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's in the future. I would actually argue, and again, we can talk about this another day, but I would actually argue that the trajectory your life's on in this life will be the trajectory your life will be on in the next life. Like, there are some people who don't want to go to heaven because they don't want to follow Jesus now. Why would you want to do that for the rest of your life? Why would you want to do that for eternity? Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to get everybody to go to heaven. I'm just saying there are some people who that would be misery. Spending eternity with Jesus when they've never wanted to follow him before that? But what's happening here is he's saying this is a trajectory you're on. And the way you live this life will affect how the rest of eternity goes. He's saying you're not just going to be thrown in the fires then. Your life is going to be worthless now. Your life is going to be the worst of what humanity has to offer now. If you let anger take you over, it's going to become a problem, not then, but it's going to become a problem now. See, I think we worry so much about what's going to happen in the future, we forget to worry about what's happening in the present. Jesus is not worried about your anger in the eternity. He's worried about your anger right now, how it affects other people. So here's the progression. If I was to put together, I told you we'd take it apart. Now we're going to just look at a quick progression. Here's the progression if I was to kind of write out what I think Jesus is doing here. And I want you to see how brilliant what he does here is. So the first thing that happens in the progression is we get angry. Okay? So whatever happens, we become angry. Now, in our culture, usually when we get angry, we love, and this is just our culture, I think we wear the victimization badge as a badge of honor a lot of times. And so we become angry, but we become victimized in that anger. We decide that we are always on the right side of justice. Somebody else is always on the wrong side of justice, but we're always the right ones. So we get angry, we kind of become victimized, and we believe that. There's a great book I read a few years ago called I Wear the Black Hat, and it's actually about how villains work. And it actually is very scary to read because you start to realize, what if I'm a villain? What if I'm not the hero of this story? What if I'm actually part of the problem? Oh, we hate that stuff. It's not fun. But that's what Jesus might be saying. He's saying you start to take this oppressed view of yourself. You become the victim. And in so doing, the second thing happens, which is when you become contemptful. You grow from angry into contempt. Contempt is like that deep-seated version of anger. It's that part that lives inside of you. It never goes away. It's ugly, and it rears its head at the worst times. It's that version of anger that stays with us, that's always there. John Gottman, if you're familiar with John Gottman, he's one of the greatest psychologists in America. He has a thing called the Love Lab. He takes couples, he puts them in a love lab, is what it's called. He watches them for 48 hours, and with 90% accuracy, he can tell you if that couple will get a divorce or not, because of just the few characteristics he's watching for. And the biggest characteristic, the number one thing that he says will absolutely end a marriage is contempt. Contempt is what he says is the number one thing. Actually, interestingly enough, you'll know if you have contempt because actually there's studies to show that your health is worse just because you're a person full of contempt. Anyways, he says this, when we are in this state, we are truly mean. We treat others with disrespect. We mock them with sarcasm. We ridicule them, call them names, and mimic them using body language or eye rolling or scoffing. The target of contempt is made to feel despised and worthless, right? Because we feel better about ourselves. They are less than, we are more than. So contempt goes far beyond criticism. While criticism attacks your partner's character, contempt assumes a position of moral authority over them. Right? We're better than. And so he says contempt is fueled by long, simmering, negative thoughts about the partner, which come to a head when the perpetrator attacks the accused from a position of relative superiority. Do you see what happens in contempt? We move from victimization and we start to assume we are right and we are better than. And so we move towards this idea of being contempt. From there, the third thing we see is then he starts to talk about calling names. We create a label for other people that we don't like. We create a label. This is one of the most dangerous things because it allows us, again, to dehumanize somebody and just call them something, and therefore we can write them off. Guys, this happens all the time, and it may not just be happening in your mind. It may be happening with the things you consume. If I could give you one quick piece of advice, and this is unsolicited, I know that you didn't come here for this. When you consume news, if that news draws a line and calls us, and them, that is no longer news. That is punditry. I got two great pieces of advice from reading a few books and talking to some people years ago. One is that you should always pay for your news. Because if you don't, remember, you're the product. You're the product, not the news. Pay for your news. Secondly, be careful that your news does not say us or them in it. That's punditry. When they start telling you that we believe this way and they are doing that thing, that's not news anymore. News is just a bare bones fact that is laid out for you to decide what to do with. That's how news should work. In our world, we love to create labels because we can dismiss large groups of people as quickly as possible. Oh, they're Republicans. Oh, they're Democrats. Oh, they're white collar. Oh, they're working class. They're blue collar. Education, huge one right now. Oh, they're the elites. No, they're the dumb ones. They're not college educated or not whatever. There's just massive amounts of these that we could go through. This is where races get divided. This is where people get divided. This is where Christians divide themselves and Christians divide themselves from everybody else in the world. We love to create labels. It's one of the most dangerous things we can do because it allows us to dehumanize somebody. Then we just call them the label they are, and then it's easier to write them off as not a human anymore because they're a label, aren't they? This is really dangerous. And so what we do is we create a label, and from there, the fourth thing I would say is then we express that anger. The anger comes out of us in whatever form it's going to come out of. And it might come out as terrible words. It might come out as terrible remarks. It might come out as the things that Jesus is talking about, or it may even come out as, and this is why Jesus makes this comparison, it might even come out as physical violence. Sometimes it's verbal violence. Sometimes it's physical violence. Neither one is necessarily right. They're both wrong. And Jesus is saying that's why I'm comparing this thing of murder all the way to this thing of anger. Because it starts with anger and it ends in murder or assault or violence or just terrible things that you've said. And you know the moment you've said something. I don't know if I'm the only one. You know the moment you've said something out of anger or you said something that you did not mean to, and you watch as that person that you said that to kind of dies inside. You know what I'm talking about? And you know you can't take it back. You can apologize, but you can't take it back. I mean, my mom, I don't know about you, when I was growing up, she would take that tube of toothpaste thing, you know what I'm talking about? She'd squeeze out the toothpaste, and then she'd say, now try to get the toothpaste back in the tube. And the lesson was that you can't. Once it's out, it's already made a mess. And you can try to get it back in the tube, but what's out is out. Sometimes that happens. We express our anger, and in doing so, we have just furthered the kingdom of hell. We are now part of hell's agenda here on earth. We're living in an actual, real-life hell here on earth. We're not waiting for hell someday. Hell is happening right now, and we're a part of that kingdom. But he's saying, now we're contributors to hell on earth. But he's saying, if you can learn to do this, if you can learn to manage this and handle this, you can be a contributor of the kingdom of heaven in a place that loves anger. And here's quick, I know this is long. I'm going to give you quick two things that he talks about here. Two quick principles, because he tells us very practically two ways to handle this, okay? So follow me real quick of verse 23. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, you leave your gift there in front of the altar, and then first go and be reconciled with them, then come offer your gift. Now, this is kind of a funny thing, because think about this for a second. Remember, Jesus is talking. Do you remember where he's at? He's on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. There is one altar. When he says, go, and you're at the altar, there's one altar in this whole area, and it's in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is 80 miles away. It's kind of funny, because what he's saying is, if you took you and your, lamb down to go sacrifice the lamb, and you got your lamb, and you're walking to the temple, you walked 80 miles there. You get to the altar 80 miles away, and now you're like, oh no, somebody's real mad at me, and I'm mad at them. Oh boy. Can you watch Spot, or whatever your lamb's name is, Fido, or I don't know what you name a lamb. Lamb chop. And you leave him there. You watch Veal for me. And you run. He's like saying, you run. You run 80 miles back. And you make things right between you and them before you ever go run back and sacrifice that. It's almost comical what he's saying, but he's saying that's how seriously I take this. And here's why I think he says that, is because your relationship with God seems to have a correlation to your relationship with other people. You cannot be in right standing with God until you are in right standing with the people around you. But here's the scarier part, is that the inverse of that is also true. That other people's relationship with God is contingent upon their relationship with you. If we're angry with people all the time, if we're mean to people all the time, if we label people all the time, well, guess what? When it comes like time and we're like, I hope you come to know Jesus, and they're like, if it looks like you, I don't want anything to do with it. Are we surprised? Should we be surprised? Your relationship is contingent on your relationship with others, but others' relationship with God is contingent upon you, your relationship with them. Jesus said, if you look just like everybody else, nobody's going to want to do this either. His way is different than our way. Go make it right with them. And the second thing he says, and this we'll end, I promise here, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way. On the way. Okay, so you're on your way to court. That means like people would get sued all the time. That's a very common thing that happened in this day. And you would go to court. He says, do it on the way. Don't wait till you get there. Or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. We could talk about this for a bit, but what's most important? Do it on the way. Here's one thing I've learned, and this is actually backed by studies upon studies. One of the things that we love to do is we love to wait. When we get angry, we think, well, I'll just wait till I cool down. Maybe. But sometimes we wait too long. How many of you have had a conflict or an anger that you've had in your heart, and the longer you've let it sit, the better it's gotten? Right? Or how many of you have like dealt with it and then it got better? Just saying, don't let it sit forever. Do this on the way. One study specifically that I love shows that venting, one of the things we love to do is we love to go and talk about it with other people, right? We take our anger out with others. Venting does not make it better for you. The idea is that we take it off of ourselves. We let it out to somebody else, and then we're going to feel better. It does not do that. In fact, venting only replays the anger in your head over and over again, making it worse, not better. He's saying, don't go to other people about it. Go to the person. Go to the source. Have that conversation now. If we do this right, Jesus is saying right before this, he said that you're going to be the salt and light of the world. If we're going to do this right, this will be how we become contributors to the kingdom. We will be salt and light in this world that needs it so much. And so many of us, we look just like everything else around us. But he's going to call us to be peacemakers, not to be those who stoke fear or anger. He's going to call us to be peacemakers, not those who continue to be angry or violent against. He's going to call us to be peacemakers, not people who label other people and write them off. We're going to be called to be peacemakers. One of my favorite quotes about this comes from a guy who I think was America's pastor without being known as America's pastor. His name is Mr. Fred Rogers. And Fred Rogers, he once wrote, he said, one of the most important messages we can give our children is it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hurt ourselves or others. Besides giving children the right to their anger, we can encourage them to find constructive things to do with their feelings. We can use that for right. But he says, in this way, we'll be giving them useful tools that will serve them in all of their life and help them to become the world's future, not anger mongers, not people who label and write off, not people who cause and stoke more division in our world, but they'll be now the world's future peacemakers, the world's future helpers. I hope that's true of all of us that follow Jesus, that we be known as peacemakers, not as anger mongers. And so today, I hope that I know this isn't like there's not a big emotional point to this beyond the fact that I hope that we take this seriously as Jesus does. That this will either breathe life or it will take life out of people. That this will either bring the kingdom of heaven or it will contribute to the kingdom of hell here on earth. This isn't just a character issue. This is a kingdom issue. If you would, let's stand together as we close this morning. Jesus, I thank you for this time together, and I thank you for your teaching and your words. I thank you for the way that you instruct us so clearly. And Jesus, in such a practical way, you make such a difference in our lives. And I pray that we would look different to the world around us. We would not look like people of anger. We would not look like people who are mad or mean. We would look like people who are contriving or people who are contemptful. We'd be people who are peacemakers in a world that needs it so bad. I pray that you would convict us in the moments that we need to be convicted. That you would call us out in our own hearts and souls and our own spirits in the moments where we are being people of anger. that even just the moments where we call somebody something, we make a label for somebody, where we write them off for something else, the moments that we feel that we are self-righteous or indignant, that you would call us out. That you would convict us in those moments. We thank you for your great, great love for us, for the way that you have shown peace to us and you have shown grace to us, and grace upon grace upon grace. When we look at ourselves, we know that we are not perfect, and so we forgive those who are not perfect against us. We release the anger within us so that we can be people who are peacemakers in an earth that needs it so bad. We pray that you'd help us most of all to be contributors to the kingdom of heaven in our daily lives, and from here where we go, in our homes, in our schools, in our businesses, that you would help us to be people who are peacemakers, who are contributing to your kingdom of heaven in those places. I pray these things in your name. Amen. Amen. Well,